She texts you when she's bored. She disappears when you're available. She keeps you close enough to give her attention, but never close enough to choose you. And the worst part? You feel it. That quiet humiliation of being kept instead of wanted. Of being an option, not a priority. Let me be very clear with you. She's not confused. She's not figuring things out. She knows exactly where you stand in her life. The real problem isn't that you're not good enough. It's that you're playing the wrong role in her world, and she's benefiting from it. Today, I'm going to show you 5 ways to stop letting a woman treat you like an option, and more importantly, how to shift your position so this pattern never repeats again. I'm speaking to you as a woman who understands how women think, how attraction actually works, and why certain men get stuck in this painful position without realizing how they got there. This isn't about manipulation, and it's not about turning into someone you're not. It's about changing the power dynamic, quietly, decisively, and permanently. If you've ever felt sidelined, overlooked, or emotionally kept on standby, this conversation is for you. Before we go deeper, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Because what I'm about to break down will change how you see relationships from this point forward. She didn't forget your value. She sorted it. That's the part most men struggle to accept because it sounds colder than the truth they want. But as a woman, I need you to hear this clearly. When a woman treats you like an option, it's not confusion, it's classification. Women constantly organize the men in their lives into emotional categories, not consciously, not maliciously, but instinctively. And when you land in the option category, it's because you serve a function without creating pressure. You regulate her ego. You provide attention when she needs it. You're safe, familiar, and reliably available. That's the first mechanism at play. Ego regulation. When her confidence dips, when the man she wants isn't giving her reassurance, she reaches for the person who always answers. Not because she misses him, but because he stabilizes how she feels about herself. The second mechanism is attention backup. In modern dating, attention is currency, and backup attention is insurance. You're the policy she keeps active, so she never has to sit with silence, uncertainty, or rejection for too long. Then there's mate switching. In an environment where options feel endless, women don't choose until they feel compelled to. And nothing kills that urgency faster than a man who is always ready, always waiting, always emotionally on standby. So she keeps you close, but never close enough. You don't challenge her comfort. You don't force a decision. You don't make her risk losing you. And because of that, she never has to choose. This is where most men misread the situation. They think consistency will be rewarded. They believe patience equals maturity. They assume availability signals security. From a female perspective, it often signals the opposite. Because desire doesn't grow where there's no tension. Respect doesn't form where access is guaranteed. And attraction doesn't deepen when a man centers his emotional availability around a woman who hasn't earned it. Here's the uncomfortable truth you need to sit with. A man who is always available is rarely selected. Not because he lacks value, but because he never requires a decision. When you're easy to keep, you're easy not to choose. Number 1. Stop explaining your worth. Most men don't realize this is where they start losing power. Not when she pulls away. Not when she takes longer to reply. But when they feel the urge to explain themselves. You explain because you want to be understood. You explain because you want fairness. You explain because you believe that if she truly saw your intentions, your loyalty, your effort, she would treat you differently. That instinct feels honest. It feels mature. It feels right. From a woman's perspective, it often reads very differently. When a man explains his value, it doesn't sound like clarity. It sounds like insecurity. Not because he lacks worth, but because he's trying to convince someone who hasn't asked to be convinced. Here's what most women experience in those moments. A long message, emotional detail, carefully chosen words meant to create connection. And what registers instead is pressure, emotional weight. A quiet shift in dynamics where the man is now seeking validation instead of embodying certainty. Attraction doesn't respond to monologues. Respect doesn't rise because someone made a good case for themselves. You are not a presentation. You are not a pitch. And your value is not something that needs to be packaged and sold. The moment you start explaining why you matter, you hand over leverage. You move from being observed to being evaluated. And once that happens, the power dynamic tilts away from you. This is why explanations rarely change behavior. They might produce temporary reassurance, longer replies, softer words, but not real investment. Because attention can be given without respect. Comfort can exist without commitment. Every explanation quietly tells her the same thing. I'm still here, even if you don't choose me. And that's the habit you have to break. The shift happens when you stop trying to be understood and start letting your actions speak in silence. When you don't rush to clarify your intentions. When you don't defend your position. When you don't chase emotional resolution. You let your standards do the talking. You let your presence become conditional. You let space replace speeches. And something changes. Not because she suddenly understands you better, but because you finally stop negotiating your worth. A man who knows his value doesn't explain it. He demonstrates it through what he allows and what he quietly withdraws from. When you stop explaining, you don't lose connection. You lose the illusion that talking was ever the solution. Here's where many men relapse, right after they swear they're done explaining. She sends a long message. She replies with warmth. She asks a question that feels personal. And suddenly, hope sneaks back in. From your side, it feels like progress. From hers, it's often just attention management. You need to understand this distinction clearly. Attention is not value, and responsiveness is not investment. Women can give attention without emotional risk. They can engage, flirt, even open up slightly without ever changing how they see you. Because attention costs nothing. Commitment does. Let me give you a scenario I see all the time. She goes quiet for days. You pull back. Then she returns with a thoughtful message, maybe even an apology. Your nervous system relaxes. You think, she gets it now. But what actually happened is simpler. She felt the absence of your attention and reached out to restore it. Not because she chose you, but because she noticed you stepping away. That's the difference most men miss. When a woman values you, she moves toward consistency. When she values your attention, she moves just enough to keep it accessible. Long texts don't mean depth. Fast replies don't mean priority. Emotional tone doesn't equal emotional commitment. What matters is pattern, not moment. If she engages only when you pull back, if warmth appears only when access feels threatened, if closeness never turns into clarity, then you're not being chosen, you're being managed. And here's the truth that stings, but frees you. If someone has to be nudged into recognizing your value, they're not overlooking it. They're opting out of it. They're making a choice that keeps their comfort intact. This is why chasing attention is such a dangerous trap. It conditions you to mistake reaction for intention. It keeps you emotionally invested in crumbs instead of standards. When you stop measuring progress by messages and start measuring it by behavior, the fog lifts. You stop asking, is she interested? And start asking, is this consistent? And once you see that clearly, you don't need reassurance anymore. You need alignment. Because real value isn't proven by how much attention someone gives you. It's revealed by how much access they're willing to earn. Number 2. Boundaries are action, not warnings. This is where many men believe they're doing the right thing, while quietly sabotaging themselves. They talk about boundaries. They explain what they won't tolerate. They express disappointment, frustration, even hurt. But when the behavior repeats, nothing changes. From a woman's perspective, that doesn't look like strength. It looks like flexibility disguised as standards. Here's the truth most people avoid. A boundary without consequence is not a boundary. It's a suggestion. And suggestions don't shape behavior. Outcomes do. Women don't respond to what you say you deserve. They respond to what you consistently enforce. Not because they're cruel, but because human beings adapt to the rules of access they're given. This is where fear enters the picture. Men hesitate to enforce boundaries because they're afraid of losing her. Afraid that if they pull back, she'll walk away. Afraid that standing firm will end the connection for good. And sometimes, it will. But what's worse than someone leaving when you draw a line is someone staying while slowly eroding your self-respect. When you allow disrespect once, it sets a precedent. When you allow it twice, it becomes permission. And by the third time, it's the relationship. This is why boundaries must be behavioral, not verbal. When someone disrespects your time, you don't argue about it. You remove your time. When effort drops, you don't negotiate for more. You reduce access. When consistency disappears, you don't chase clarity. You step back into alignment. That's not punishment. That's self-regulation. From a female psychological standpoint, this is where respect either forms or disappears. A man who enforces boundaries without anger, without drama, without explanation, communicates something powerful. My presence is conditional on how I'm treated. And here's the part that surprises many men. The women who are capable of real connection don't test boundaries. They recognize them and adjust. The ones who push, poke, and cross lines are revealing exactly why those boundaries are necessary. This is the shift you need to make. Stop trying to be understood and start being consistent. Because the moment your actions match your standards, the dynamic changes. Either she rises to meet them, or she removes herself. And both outcomes restore your power. A woman who truly respects you will never need to be reminded where the line is. She'll feel it. Number 3, refocus on your goals. This is where the real power shift begins, because nothing pulls a man out of the option category faster than reclaiming his direction. Distraction doesn't ruin men overnight. It erodes them slowly. One unanswered message, one delayed reply, one night spent replaying conversations instead of moving forward. And before you realize it, your emotional state is reacting to her behavior instead of being anchored in your purpose. From the outside, it looks harmless. From the inside, it's devastating. The moment your schedule revolves around her availability, you've already lost leverage. When your mood rises and falls based on whether she texts back, she's no longer just part of your life. She's controlling its rhythm. From a woman's perspective, this is immediately felt. Not logically, but viscerally. A man without direction feels emotionally heavy. He feels absorbent instead of grounded. And no matter how kind or consistent he is, that lack of internal focus quietly lowers his position. Here's what many men don't want to hear. Attraction grows toward motion, toward clarity, toward a man who is building something that doesn't pause for uncertainty. A man with goals doesn't chase alignment. He attracts it. That doesn't mean working non-stop or pretending not to care. It means structuring your life so your time, energy, and attention are invested forward, not upward, towards someone who hasn't committed. Set a target that demands discipline. Create a daily structure that doesn't bend for emotional fluctuation. Replace motivation with consistency. Because motivation fades, but systems don't. When your focus shifts back to your growth, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop monitoring her reactions. You stop waiting. You stop interpreting silence as meaning. And she feels that shift. Not because you announced it, not because you threatened to leave, but because your energy is no longer available on demand. A man who is deeply engaged in his own progress doesn't need to withdraw attention intentionally. His attention becomes scarce naturally. And scarcity, earned through purpose, not manipulation, is what moves you out of the option space entirely. Because a man who is busy building his life doesn't have room to be treated like a backup. Number 4. Choose growth over closure. Closure feels mature. It sounds healthy. It convinces you that one last conversation will finally set you free. But from a psychological standpoint, closure is often just attachment, wearing a cleaner mask. Men chase closure because they want their pain to be acknowledged. They want the confusion to make sense. They want to hear something, anything, that confirms the effort they gave wasn't wasted. Here's what I need you to understand from a woman's perspective. When someone consistently treats you like an option, they already gave you their answer. Not with words, but with behavior. And behavior doesn't need clarification. The urge for closure keeps you emotionally tethered. It keeps you replaying moments, rereading messages, imagining explanations that would soften the reality. But explanations don't heal wounds caused by patterns. They just delay acceptance. This is the part that's hard to hear. The person who caused the damage is rarely capable of providing the repair. Not because they're evil, but because they benefited from the dynamic exactly as it was. If she wanted to choose you, she would have. If she valued consistency, she would have shown it. If she feared losing you, you would have felt it. From a female psychological lens, clarity isn't delivered through conversation, it's revealed through distance. Space removes distortion. Absence exposes truth. This is where growth enters. Growth doesn't ask why. Growth asks, what now? When you stop chasing explanations and redirect that energy into yourself, your habits, your structure, your standards, your nervous system starts to recalibrate. You regain emotional balance, not because you understand her better, but because you're no longer orienting your life around her decisions. Distance gives clarity. Growth gives power. And here's the shift most men underestimate. When you choose growth over closure, you exit the loop entirely. You stop waiting for permission to move on. You stop hoping for validation from someone who already demonstrated their priorities. Closure keeps you facing backward. Growth turns you forward. One keeps you tied to her version of events. The other puts you back in control of your own. You don't need her explanation to heal. You need momentum. You need alignment. You need to outgrow the version of yourself that needed answers from someone who never chose you. Because once you grow past the situation, closure becomes irrelevant. Number 5. Walk away without drama. This is the moment most men get wrong, not because they don't want to leave, but because they want to leave and be understood. They want the last word. They want their pain acknowledged. They want her to finally realize what she lost. And that desire quietly hands the power right back to her. From a woman's perspective, drama doesn't signal strength. It signals emotional entanglement. The more explanation, emotion, and intensity you attach to your exit, the more it confirms that she still has access to you. Walking away without drama is different. It's not cold. It's not cruel. It's controlled. This is where ego and self-respect split paths. Ego wants to be seen. Self-respect wants peace. When you disappear calmly, without speeches, without ultimatums, without emotional outbursts, something very specific happens psychologically. She doesn't feel abandoned. She feels cut off. Not from affection, but from access. And that's what creates impact. Women don't feel loss when love disappears. They feel loss when availability does. This is an important distinction. Love can fade slowly. Access disappears instantly. And when it does, the dynamic flips. Not because you planned it, but because you finally stopped offering yourself to a situation that wasn't choosing you. Now let's be clear about something. This is not ghosting. Ghosting is avoidance. Protection is intentional. You're not trying to punish her. You're not trying to teach her a lesson. You're choosing to remove your time and energy from a space where they weren't respected. Silence in this context is not a tactic, it's alignment. When you walk away quietly, you send a message without saying a word. I know my value, and I don't negotiate it. That message lands far deeper than any explanation ever could. And whether she reflects, regrets, or replaces you is no longer your concern, because the moment you leave without drama, you stop performing for her understanding and start answering to yourself. Here's the truth that closes this chapter. Silence is not a weapon against her. It's loyalty to yourself. And a man who can walk away with calm certainty is no longer an option. He's already moved beyond the game. This is where everything comes together, not as a tactic, but as an identity shift. At this point, you need to understand something crucial. You were never meant to handle her. You were meant to change the version of yourself that tolerated being handled. When a man focuses on fixing the situation, he stays trapped inside it. When he focuses on becoming someone with standards, the situation either rises or disappears. That's the difference between being an option and being a standard. A standard doesn't chase. A standard doesn't explain. A standard doesn't negotiate its worth. When you become that man, the rules change automatically. Not because you demand better treatment, but because you no longer participate in dynamics that require you to ask for it. This is the part that feels uncomfortable at first. Some women will pull away, some connections will fade, and that's not loss, it's filtration. You're no longer available to people who only thrived when you were over-giving, over-explaining, and undervaluing yourself. Here's what most men don't realize. You don't lose her when you step into your standard. You lose the version of the relationship that required you to shrink. And in return, you get something far more valuable. You get yourself back. You stop waking up wondering where you stand. You stop monitoring tone, timing, and signals. You stop needing reassurance to feel steady. Because your identity no longer depends on being chosen. From a woman's perspective, this shift is unmistakable. A man who knows his boundaries, protects his time, and moves with quiet certainty occupies a completely different psychological space. He's not auditioning, he's evaluating. And that's the moment the dynamic flips. Not every woman will qualify for access to this version of you. And that's exactly the point. You were never meant to be universally available. You were meant to be selective, grounded, self-directed. You didn't lose her. You outgrew the role that kept you optional. And once you step into that identity, you don't need to protect your position anymore, because being a standard speaks for itself. If you think back to the beginning of this conversation,